At 0517 on the morning of September 13, 1943, Private First Class William J. Crawford crouched in a shallow depression 35 m below the crest of Hill 424, watching German machine gun traces cut horizontal lines through the pre-dawn darkness. 28 years old, Pueblo, Colorado. 0 confirmed kills. The 16th Panzer Grenadier Division had 3 MG-34 machine guns dug into the rocky slopes above Altar Villa, and in the past 6 hours they had killed 9 men from Company I 142nd Infantry Regiment. Crawford's platoon sergeant had called his scouting skills unremarkable. The other squad leaders said Crawford moved through terrain like a ranch hand, checking fence lines, slow and methodical, no tactical imagination. When Crawford had volunteered to infiltrate forward and locate the German positions, Lieutenant Morrison wanted to know if this was bravery or stupidity. Crawford explained his qualifications. 4 years hunting mule deer in the San Isabel National Forest. Shots taken at ranges exceeding 400 yards. Every kill a hedge shot to preserve meat. Morrison told Crawford to stay in the Gotham Hole and wait for artillery support. Crawford went anyway. The 36th Infantry Division had landed at Salerno 4 days earlier on September 9. They had expected light resistance. Instead, they found German forces occupying every piece of high ground surrounding the Selle Plain, observation posts with perfect fields of fire, artillery zeroed on every approach route. The terrain was a killing floor. Alt Villa sat 420 m above sea level, steep volcanic limestone slopes with sparse vegetation, no cover except scattered olive trees and stone terraces left by farmers who had abandoned the land when the fighting started. Hill 424 controlled the road network leading inland from the beach head. German forces held it with approximately 2 companies, maybe 200 men supported by mortars and the 3 MG-34 positions that were currently shredding every American attempt to advance. Company I had tried a frontal assault at 2,300 hours on September 12. They got 50 m UPS slope before the machine guns opened up. 9 men killed, 14 wounded, the rest pinned down in the rocks until they could crawl back after midnight. Morrison's platoon had been tasked with locating the German positions for a preparatory artillery barrage scheduled for 0600 hours. But locating required getting close. Getting close required someone willing to crawl through 150 meters of open ground while 3 machine guns swept the approach with interlocking fire. Crawford carried an M1 Garand weighing 4.3 kilograms, 8 rounds in the magazine, 48 additional rounds in 6 spare clips on his belt. He carried 3 Mk2 fragmentation grenades, each weighing 227 g, each with a lethal radius of 5 m. He carried a canteen half empty, no helmet. Crawford had removed it before leaving the company perimeter because the steel dome caught moonlight and created a silhouette. He wore a knit cap pulled low. His uniform was standard olive drab wool, but Crawford had rubbed mud on the fabric to kill the smell of army-issue soap. Deer could smell soap at 200 m. Crawford assumed Germans could too. The first machine gun was 30 m directly ahead, positioned behind a stone wall that formed part of an old terrace system. Crawford had been watching it for 20 minutes. The crew fired in 8 to 12 round bursts, traverse left to right, systematic coverage of the slope below. Between bursts, Crawford could hear them talking, German voices, calm and professional. The MG-34 had a cyclic rate of 900 rounds per minute. At that range, the gunner did not need to aim carefully. He just needed to keep the barrel moving and let the bullets find targets. The second and third machine guns were somewhere UPS slope, maybe 75 m higher, positioned to provide mutual support and cover any dead ground the first gun could not reach. Crawford had not seen them yet. He would have to neutralize the first gun before he could locate the others. At 0523, Crawford began moving. Not crawling, not low crawling, just sliding forward on his stomach with his elbows pulling his body over the rocks inches per minute. He kept his face turned to the right so the pale skin of his cheek would not reflect light. He breathed through his mouth to avoid the sound of air moving through his nostrils. Every 10 he stopped and waited, listening. The machine gun fired again. 12 rounds. Crawford counted the seconds until the next burst. 18 seconds. Enough time to move 3 if he was fast. But Crawford was not fast. He was methodical. He waited through 6 more bursts, mapping the pattern, confirming the interval. Then he moved again. If you want to see how a ranch hand from Pueblo neutralized 3 German machine gun positions using skills he learned hunting deer, please hit that like button. It helps us share more forgotten stories like this. And please subscribe if you haven't already. Crawford reached the stone wall at 0544. The machine gun was 4 to his left, barrel protruding through a gap in the stones. He could see the gunner's shoulder, the assistant gunner feeding the belt, a third soldier sitting with his back against the wall, smoking a cigarette. Crawford pulled a grenade from his belt. The Mark II had a 4 to 5 second fuse. At 4 the fragments would kill everyone behind that wall, but the explosion would alert the other 2 gun crews upslope. Crawford would have maybe 10 seconds before they opened fire. 10 seconds to locate the second gun, reach cover, and start moving again. He pulled the pin. He let the spoon fly. He counted 2 seconds. He threw the grenade over the wall. It landed behind the machine gun with a metallic clank. One German voice shouted a warning. Then the grenade detonated. Crawford did not wait to confirm the kill. He was already moving right, paralleling the terrace wall, heading for an outcrop of rocks 15 m away. He reached it as the second machine gun opened fire. The rounds hit the terrace wall where he had been lying 3 seconds earlier. Stone fragments exploded outward. Crawford pressed himself into the rocks and listened. The second gun was firing from UPS slope and to the left, maybe 60 m away. The sound echoed off the hillside, making precise location difficult. But Crawford did not need precision. He needed direction and distance. He had both. The sky was turning gray. Dawn would arrive in 20 minutes. After that, concealment would become impossible. German observers on the crest would see him moving and direct fire onto his position. Crawford had to finish before first light. He began climbing, not directly toward the second gun, but at an angle, using the terrain to stay below the gun's line of fire. The hillside was a maze of stone terraces, each 1 meter high, built centuries ago to create level planting surfaces on the steep slope. Crawford used them for cover, moving from one to the next, pulling himself over clears throughout the rock faces, crawling across the narrow strips of dirt behind them. The second machine gun fired in long bursts now, 20 to 30 rounds, sweeping the lower slopes where Company I was still pinned down. The gun crew had not seen Crawford yet. They were firing at muzzle flashes from American rifles 200 meters downslope. At 0552, Crawford reached a position 40 m below the second gun. He could see it now, positioned in a small depression gouged into the hillside. Sandbags piled around the front and sides, 2 men visible. The gun was oriented downslope, covering the American positions. The crew's backs were exposed to anyone approaching from below. Crawford pulled his second grenade. He estimated the distance at 35 m. Too far for an accurate throw. He would have to get closer. He left the rocks and began crawling across open ground, angling upslope toward a cluster of olive trees 20 m from the gun position. The earth was loose volcanic soil mixed with gravel. Every movement produced small scraping sounds. Crawford moved during the machine gun bursts, froze when they stopped. The German crew was focused downslope. They did not turn. Crawford reached the olive trees at 0557. From the trees, he could see the third machine gun. It was positioned 50 m UPS slope from the second, dug into the base of a rock formation near the crest. The third gun was not firing. The crew was waiting, probably under orders to conserve ammunition and provide overwatch while the other 2 guns engaged targets. Crawford understood the tactic. The third gun was insurance position to cover the other two if they were attacked. If Crawford destroyed the second gun, the third gun would kill him before he could reach cover. He needed to neutralize both guns simultaneously. That was impossible. Crawford decided to change the geometry. He pulled his third grenade. He pulled the pin, but held the spoon down. He stood up behind the olive tree, exposing his upper body. He threw the grenade at the second machine gun position. The throw was slightly short. The grenade landed 3 m in front of the sandbags and detonated on impact with the rocks. The explosion blew dirt and fragments forward into the gun position. Crawford saw one German soldier thrown backward. Then he was running UPS slope toward the third gun, covering 25 m in 6 seconds before diving behind a stone terrace. The third machine gun opened fire. The rounds hit the terrace face, chipping stone, sending fragments over Crawford's head. He pressed himself flat and waited. The German gunner at the third position was firing blind, suppressing the area where Crawford had disappeared. Long bursts, 40 to 50 rounds, emptying the belt. Crawford heard the gun fall silent. He heard voices shouting in German. The crew was reloading. Crawford pulled himself over the terrace wall and sprinted up slope. He covered 15 m before the gun started firing again. He dove behind a boulder as rounds snapped past. He had closed the distance to 20 m. Close enough. Crawford had no grenades left. He had his rifle and 8 rounds. The MG-34 position was dug in behind sandbags with overhead cover. A rifle shot would not penetrate. Crawford needed the crew to leave the position. He needed them to come to him. He fired a single round from the Garand, aiming high, letting the bullet crack over the machine gun nest. The gun stopped firing. Crawford waited. 30 seconds passed. Then a German soldier appeared at the right edge of the sandbag wall, head and shoulders visible, scanning for targets. Crawford aimed, fired. The soldier dropped. The machine gun opened fire again, raking the rocks around Crawford's position. Crawford rolled left, moved 5 m, found new cover behind another boulder. He fired again. Another German soldier appeared, this one at the left edge of the position. Crawford fired. The soldier fell back. The machine gun went silent. Crawford heard boots scraping on rock, voices urgent and close. 2 German soldiers were moving out of the position, flanking right, trying to get an angle on Crawford's location. Crawford stayed low. He let them come. When they were 15 m away, moving cautiously through the rocks, Crawford rose and fired 4 rounds in rapid succession. Both soldiers went down. Crawford ejected the empty en-bloc clip, reloaded, chambered around. He moved forward to the machine gun position. It was empty. The crew had been 4 men. Crawford had killed 2 with rifle fire. The others had fled up slope toward the crest. At 0608, the sun rose over the Regial line. Crawford was standing beside the third machine gun position 380 m above the cell plane. Below him, Company I was already moving up the slope, advancing through the positions Crawford had cleared. The German defenses on Hill 424 collapsed within the hour. By 0900 hours, the 142nd Infantry Regiment controlled the crest. Crawford had destroyed 3 machine gun positions in 51 minutes using 3 grenades and 12 rifle rounds. 0 friendly casualties during the assault. The platoon sergeant, who had called Crawford's skills unremarkable, recommended him for the Medal of Honor. Lieutenant Morrison, who had told Crawford to stay in the Gotham Hole, co-signed the recommendation. But Crawford did not receive the medal on Hill 424. As Company I consolidated on the crest, German forces counterattacked from the north. Infantry supported by armor, pushing hard to retake the high ground. During the fighting, Crawford saw a wounded soldier from his squad lying in the open, hit in both legs, unable to move. Crawford left cover to reach him. He was dragging the soldier back toward friendly lines when the German patrol intercepted them. Crawford was captured. He spent the next 20 months as a prisoner of war. The Germans moved him through a series of camps in Italy, then to Stalag 7A in Bavaria after the Italian surrender. Camp records listed him as PFC William J. Crawford, taken prisoner September 13, 1943. Alta Villa. No mention of the Medal of Honor recommendation. That paperwork was moving through Army channels, slow and bureaucratic. By the time the medal was approved on September 6, 1944, Crawford was listed as missing and presumed dead. The medal was presented posthumously to his father in May 1944 during a ceremony in Pueblo. His father accepted the citation signed by President Franklin Roosevelt and placed it in a frame on the mantel. Crawford was liberated in April 1945 when American forces overran Stalag 7A during the final collapse of German resistance. He returned to the United States weighing 58 kilograms, suffering from malnutrition and tuberculosis. The Army hospitalized him for 3 months, then discharged him with full disability benefits in August 1945. Crawford returned to Pueblo and tried to resume civilian life. He did not speak about Villa. He did not speak about the prison camp. When people asked about his war service, Crawford said he had been in Italy with the 36th Division, then changed the subject. On January 13, 1946, Crawford married Eileen Bruce, a nurse he had met during his hospitalization. They bought a small house in Pueblo. Crawford worked odd jobs, carpentry and manual labor, nothing that required sustained physical effort. The tuberculosis had damaged his lungs. Heavy work left him breathless and exhausted. In 1947, Crawford re-enlisted in the Army, not for combat duty. His medical profile prohibited that. He re-enlisted for administrative work, steady pay, structure. The Army assigned him to clerical positions, eventually stationing him at the U.S. Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs when it opened in 1954. Crawford worked as a janitor. He mopped floors and emptied trash cans and cleaned cadet dormitories. The cadets did not know his name. They did not know his history. One cadet later described Crawford as the quiet janitor who never spoke unless spoken to, and even then barely. In 1984, a cadet named Bud Jacobson was researching Medal of Honor recipients for a history project. He found Crawford's name in the Academy archives listed among 4 recipients from Pueblo. Jacobson cross-referenced the name against Academy employment records. The match was exact. William J. Crawford, janitor, 3rd floor dormitory. Jacobson reported his finding to the Academy superintendent. The superintendent initiated an inquiry. They discovered that Crawford had never received his medal in person, had never been properly recognized. The posthumous presentation in 1944 had been based on erroneous information. Crawford was very much alive, mopping floors in the same building where cadets studied military history and learned about heroism. On February 8, 1984, President Ronald Reagan presented the Medal of Honor to William J. Crawford during a formal ceremony at the Air Force Academy. Crawford was 65 years old. He stood on the parade ground in front of 4,000 cadets and received the medal he had earned 41 years earlier. Reagan read the citation aloud, describing the actions at Altilla, the 3 machine gun positions, the crawling advance and the fire, the grenades thrown at close range. When Reagan placed the medal around Crawford's neck, the cadets stood and applauded for 4 minutes. Crawford did not speak during the ceremony. When reporters asked for comment afterward, Crawford said, "I was just doing my job." Crawford retired from the Air Force Academy in 1967 after 20 years of civil service. He and Eileen remained in Pueblo. He spent his retirement hunting in the San Isabel National Forest, the same mountains where he had learned to shoot mule deer as a teenager. He died on March 15, 2000 at Palmer Lake, Colorado. Natural causes, age 81. Colorado Governor Bill Owens ordered all state flags lowered to half-staff. Crawford was buried with full military honors at the Air Force Academy Cemetery. The tactics Crawford used at Altar Villa became case studies in Army infantry schools. Not the heroism, the mechanics, the use of terrain to approach fortified positions, the timing of grenade throws to create confusion, the decision to target crew-served weapons first, eliminating the greatest threat before engaging individual riflemen, the understanding that 3 men behind a machine gun were more dangerous than 30 men with rifles. Those lessons were incorporated into field manuals published in 1946 and revised through the 1950s. The Army did not credit Crawford by name in the manuals, but instructors at Fort Benning used Altarilla as an example of how individual initiative could collapse defensive positions that would otherwise require artillery preparation and frontal assault. The 36th Infantry Division had been trained for rapid assault tactics, overwhelming firepower, and aggressive movement. Crawford's approach was the opposite. Slow infiltration, careful observation, patient execution. He had spent 4 years hunting deer in mountains where a wrong step meant going home empty. He applied the same discipline to hunting Germans on Hill 424. The ranch hand who moved like he was checking fence lines cleared 3 machine gun positions while an entire company waited below. The mail order scope was never needed. Crawford killed with grenades thrown from close range and rifle shots at targets too close to miss. Crawford's Medal of Honor citation noted that his actions enabled Company I to advance 150 meters and capture the crest of Hill 424 with minimal casualties. The citation did note that German forces recaptured the hill 3 days later or that the 36th Division lost another 180 men retaking it. The citation did not note that Altar Villa changed hands 4 more times before Allied forces finally secured it in late September. The tactical value of Hill 424 lasted exactly 72 hours before German armor pushed the Americans back to their original positions. But the doctrinal value of Crawford's infiltration lasted decades. Military historians studying Salerno identified Hill 424 as a critical lesson in the importance of small unit initiative. Large-scale frontal assaults against fortified positions produced casualties without decisive results. Individual soldiers using terrain and surprise could achieve disproportionate effects. That lesson influenced training doctrine for scout and reconnaissance specialties throughout the 1950s and 1960s. By Vietnam, the Army had formalized scout training to include infiltration techniques, close-range grenade employment, and independent operation without direct support. Those techniques traced their lineage directly to actions like Altar Villa, where one soldier with 3 grenades accomplished what an entire company with rifles and machine guns could not. Crawford never discussed whether his actions at Alta Villa were worth the recognition. He told his wife once, years after the 1984 ceremony, that the men who died on Hill 424 deserved medals more than he did because they had followed orders and attacked uphill into machine gun fire, knowing they would probably die. Crawford had disobeyed orders and attacked alone, which meant only he would die if the plan failed. He did not consider that heroic. He considered it practical.